Nation in Conversation, taking you on a journey through the South African countryside. Proudly sponsored by Monsanto, Nedbank and Senves, in association with Hinterland and NWK.
Hello and welcome to Nation in Conversation on our journey through the beautiful South African countryside. Today we visit a well-known town in the Limpopo province, Tzaneen, and investigate the diverse sights and sounds that make this such a special destination. This of course includes a variety of agricultural activities, but in the end we stop at the poultry industry. This is what you can look forward to in today's program. In Homegrown, we take the R71 to admire the incredible scenery en route to Tzaneen. The road then leads us to Lufafa Hatchery in Letsitele. Chris Burgess joins us in Context, and we talk to Country Bird Holdings to see just how the chicken finds its way to the shelves. Mpumelelo then closes the program in dialogue with an in-depth discussion with Kevin Lovell from the SA Poultry Association.
The word Tzaneen comes from the word Tzaneen, which means come together. Nestled among fertile gorges and hills of the Volkberg mountain, Tzaneen is the second largest town in the Limpopo province. The town sits in the middle of a subtropical paradise. Here, visitors can take a leisurely drive among the many farms, plantations and natural forests that flank the scenic routes like that of George's Valley Road. The more famous Magubas Kloof mountain pass on the R71 road is even more spectacular. This pass climbs 446 vertical meters to summit at 1,400 meters above sea level. On this route, you have the chance to pull over at the Debegeni waterfalls and the lookout point over the Ebenezer Dam. Farm stalls, quaint restaurants and tea gardens along the way are popular among locals and tourists. Many hiking trails and even some trout fishing can be found in this picturesque area. Before you finally turn off to town, you cross the impressive bridge over a part of the Tzaneen Dam. Plenty of rain and warm summer days create the perfect climate for producing tropical and subtropical crops. Farming in the area takes place over some 20,000 square kilometers. The valley below Tzaneen yields citrus like Valencia oranges and grapefruit such as Star Ruby, with this region producing the majority of the country's bananas, mangoes, avocado pears, pawpaws, tea and coffee. It is also one of the most important timber production areas in South Africa. The surrounding mountain slopes are heavily forested with pine and eucalyptus tree plantations, and close on 40 sawmills operate in the area. The small town of Letsitele is some 26 kilometers from Tzaneen and home to Lufafa Hatchery, where we are dropping in today. The hatchery is an important employer in Letsitele. It's also a valuable contributor to the food value chain in the region. Let's take a closer look at how chicks rule the roost at Lufafa.
Lufafa Hatchery has been about 25 years on the go. We've been producing day-old chicks since then. We're currently at about 250,000 day-old chicks per week. which basically come from the farm. We've got about 100,000 breeder hens on the farm which lay up to 45,000 eggs per day, which then get collected 5 times a day. The eggs get brought to the hatchery where we then incubate the eggs into setters or incubators. The eggs are approximately 21 days or 504 hours in the incubators, and after 21 days we have a little day-old chick which we then distribute to clients in and around the area as far as Thohoyandou, Palabora and as Mokopane as well. Here at Lufafa Hatchery we employ approximately 140 permanent workers. Most of the workers stay on the farm, however there are quite a few of them that choose to still go home and to their relevant communities every day.
I've been working at Lufafa Hatchery for 23 years, from 1992 up till today. So Lufafa Hatchery has done a lot in my life, in my family. Lufafa Hatchery that put my kids at school. As a supervisor, I'm supervising people, I'm looking people, I'm checking if everything is okay. Every morning till end of the day, I'm checking because we are working with the live chicks, and the cold room, we have to manage it and check the degrees are fine because they have to be 18 degrees. Remember, if it's less than 18 degrees or 16 degrees, the embryos will die. So we have to be sharp every day and check our temperatures is up to standard so that we stay on 18 degrees.
We also have initiatives whereby we employ students from Tshwane University of Technology, 2 to 3 students a year, where they then come here and they learn all our processes, they help us and work on the farm, in the chicken houses as well as in the hatchery. And at the end of the year they are then fully qualified as animal production students. And we also try and keep the local community as much involved with our processes and with our production as we can, so that they also know what Lufafa Hatchery is all about.
Did you know the South African poultry industry provides work to some 130,000 people?
Just like any other agricultural industry, the poultry industry is of paramount importance and needs our support as consumers. After the break, Chris Burgess from Landbouweekblad joins us, and Country Bird Holdings shed some light on the process from farm gate to kitchen table. Welcome back to Nation in Conversation. Today, investigating the poultry industry. It affects all of us, so please join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. With me is Chris Burgess from Landbouweekblad. Welcome, Chris.
Hi.
Everyone eats chicken. Why is it so popular?
Well, I think in one word, it's cheap. So it's a very cheap source of protein. And the reason for that is that a chicken is a very efficient converter of feed into meat. So if you take 1 kilogram of feed and you feed a chicken, it produces more meat from that 1 kilogram of feed than a sheep or cattle would do. And I mean, who doesn't enjoy eating chicken, you know?
What about those chickens that used to run around on the farms in the old days? Didn't they taste better?
Well, it depends what you like eating. So those chickens, the free range, you know, the old farm chickens, I mean, you can't put them in the oven and grill them. So it's a whole different way of preparing them. But there is quite a big market for them. And a very interesting anecdote is a farmer up in the Warmbaths, Mike Bosch, who actually did a 3-way cross between 3 indigenous chickens. And he actually bred them to eat the ticks off his cattle. And then he had this secondary industry with all the truck drivers coming down from Zimbabwe. They all stopped at his farm to get these free-range chickens. So yes, I mean there is a substantial market for the old free-range farm chicken.
We will be getting back to Chris shortly, but first here's a look at the operations at Country Bird Holdings that stretch across all major concerns within the sector.
South African poultry industry, we produce about 19 million broiler chickens per week. That makes us the biggest in the sector of agric, bigger than red meat or grains. Not a lot of people know that. To highlight that, we've got about 160 million chickens and more on the ground in South Africa on any given day. The supply chain spans across feed, breed, agric, processing, distribution and sales. The industry is set up according to an American model. It's very scientific, everything gets measured. The broiler that one eats or consumes is the fourth generation in that chain. What happens is one starts with great-grandparents, then you grow them to sexual maturity at about 20 to 22 weeks. The hens will then lay eggs up to 60 weeks, and then the next stage continues. So it's great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and then you get to the broiler. So you start initially with a pure line. So you have a pure male line, a pure female line. The male line produces a lot of protein. Female line produces a lot of egg. And then you crossbreed with those to get the right combination right through to the broiler. So a lot of multiplication, and you reduce cost as you continue down that chain. To illustrate that, if you start on the grandparent side, and you would start with a kilogram of fluffy chicks, and you would follow that chain through, it takes you about 2 years to get to delivering broilers, but that 1 kilogram produces over another 2 years and produces about 10 tons of meat. So that's the multiplication. That obviously reduces the cost. We can't eat the pure lines because it would simply be too expensive. We in particular measure things like feed conversion rate. As an example, the broiler can gain weight of about 1 kilogram for every 1.6, 1.7 kilogram of feed that it consumes. Every hen would lay about 165 eggs between that 22 weeks and 60-week age. I think a very important thing for us is to mention that we as South African industry are not only cost efficient, but we're also very efficient in terms of all those key performance indicators that we measure.
Did you know the biggest input cost in raising chickens for slaughter lies in the feed bill, which amounts to 70% of the rearing cost?
It's always revealing to see how complex the processes are to bring these goods to us as consumers. Perhaps this gives us a better understanding of the sector. Chris, why are we losing so many jobs in the poultry industry?
Well, I think the main reason that's given is import. So we're importing chicken from Europe, from the EU, from the USA, and from South America. And the problem there is that we simply can't compete with their feed. So in Brazil, they get 2 crops of maize a year, so they can just produce the feed, which is a major input in chicken farming. That you can just produce it cheaper than we can. And then secondly, the first world countries just eat the breast of the chicken. So the rest of the chicken is seen as a waste product. It's brought into the country, even if there are sometimes tariffs on it, it often lands here cheaper than what we can produce it. So in that respect, our chicken producers, our broiler producers just aren't competitive.
But shouldn't we be importing as cheaply as possible?
Yes, well, I mean, that's a good question. And I mean, we did, and we are bringing in quite a lot of mechanically deboned meat from Brazil, specifically because it's cheap. But, you know, one has to sort of take a wider perspective on this. Jobs. We employ about double the amount of people in our poultry industry than, for instance, the European Union does. And I think it's every 10,000 tons of chicken that comes in, we lose about 1,000 jobs. So, and then it's got the secondary impact on the maize industry. So I think a person needs to take a wider view on the industry.
Thank you, Chris. After the break, Mpumelelo talks to Kevin Lovell from the SA Poultry Association to further our insights into the poultry industry.
Welcome back to Nation in Conversation. With me today in the studio is Kevin Lovell from the South African Poultry Association to discuss further the issues identified in today's program. Kevin, welcome to the studio and thanks for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Are we in crisis in the poultry sector?
Oh, certainly. We're not in complain mode or in problem mode. We're in crisis mode. And the next part of that phrase is collapse mode. And I hope that we do manage to fix things before we get to collapse mode, but that's the next point.
Is that not too pessimistic? Is there a way out?
No, there's a way out, but it's not too pessimistic, because where we're at now is that any prudent banker would say, why am I providing working capital to this company or business?
Yeah.
And if the banks shut off the taps, then the industry goes into collapse mode.
Yeah.
And then 90% of all the soybean farmers have to find somebody else to use their product. About 35% of all the maize farmers have to find someone else to use their maize. So it's not just us who will collapse.
Yeah.
Others will follow suit.
You know, our farmers generally are highly ranked all over the world, and the poultry industry in this country has been very strong. So what has suddenly happened to the point that we are now in this panic crisis mode?
What happened is democracy, actually, because all the problems that the poultry industry have come from the trade agreements that we made as a country as we opened up to the world and said, let's be friends, let's work together.
Yeah.
And those agreements that we made were almost exclusively very bad for the poultry industry, because globally agriculture is distorted. Globally, the poultry market is worse than distorted. It's like a time warp. It's so off-center. And that's really the problem, is that we're suffering an unintended consequence of us opening up to the world and believing that our trading partners would treat us decently. Trade isn't about decency, it's about money. And money doesn't normally smell so good, but you can do lots of things with it.
But
and
some
that's what it's
people
about.
might say, hey, wake up, South Africa, compete.
Well, that's the interesting part, is that if you compare us to the European Union, and they're the ones giving us the hard time at the moment. Look, somebody else could give us a hard time.
Yeah.
One of their own universities, a Dutch university, University of Aachen, says that we can produce slaughtered whole birds for between 20 and 40% less than any of the EU countries they survey. In other words, logic tells you have to have a whole dead chicken before you can have pieces of a chicken. Therefore, pieces of a chicken will cost more than a whole bird. Why are they exporting? Because they dump. Why do they dump? Because they don't eat all the parts of a chicken. They're unbalanced. I mean, not as a nation or nations, but in terms of their diet.
Yeah.
Although actually, if you think about some of the politics in Europe, maybe they are unbalanced.
We know from the experience of the clothing industry and the steel industry that, competition that smashed those sectors in South Africa, almost smashed those sectors in South Africa, came from predominantly China. That's the textile as well as steel.
Correct.
Almost brought ArcelorMittal into its knees. Where is the challenge of the chicken coming from in the main?
Globally, food, most countries kind of produce their own food. Most developing countries, it's even more important. It's a sense of identity, food security.
Yeah.
So only about 13% of all the poultry produced in the world is traded. The rest is grown locally, eaten locally. That trade comes, about 90% of it comes from Brazil, the US, the EU, Thailand, Argentina. So it's a little club. We're not fighting the world, we're fighting a small club. Look, one of the members of the club's got very big guns, but other than that, we're just fighting a small group.
But you said earlier, part of the problem was South Africa rejoining the international community and now having to fight and compete globally. Through the opening of borders, trade agreements, and all of that. But part of that settlement was that we would be friends with other countries, including Brazil, which is now part of BRICS.
Correct.
Is that not helpful?
Well, look at it this way. We can't export anything to Brazil. We're not allowed to export anything to the US, chickens I'm talking about. We can't export chickens to the EU. And that's because they don't want us to. In the case of Brazil, we wouldn't be able to compete probably, but certainly in the US and the EU, we could sell them breast meat at way below their current costs. So they keep us out. So it's not a two-way street. This is very much a one-way street with some tires burning at the one end.
But is there nothing that can be done, at least domestically, to promote and perhaps brand domestic produce in line with the tastes and aspirations of South African for the survival of the industry?
Well, as it so happens, not only taste tests that are done by us, but I saw one of the newspapers ran a taste test last weekend, and they took it to to people in, I think, Umlazi, and then they took it to people in some fancy restaurant. And they all preferred South African. But you only know that once you've cooked it and eaten it, and that's too late for us. The real problem is that most of the imported stuff is sold in a way that you, as the consumer, wouldn't know it's foreign. So the best way to fix this problem is that the developed world keeps its unbalanced diet and the consequences of that for themselves. They're unlikely to do that because then it leaves them with a problem. So the second best thing we can do is that South African consumers say when they go buy that stuff and they go to that delicatessen counter and they see rows and rows of it, they ask the guy or the woman behind the counter, where's it from? If it's foreign, don't buy it. If you go to a restaurant and you want chicken, ask them where it comes from. If it's foreign, don't buy it. If you go to the freezer, foreign, don't buy it. Quite a lot of the retailers actually
Can you
defrost.
compete through price?
Well, against Europe, we can compete with price any day and Sunday. It doesn't matter which day of the week. We're always cheaper and better than them in terms of delivering to the market. When it comes to Brazil, they are definitely cheaper than us because they pay less for maize and soybeans than we do. When it comes to converting the animal food we use into human food, chickens, or pieces of chickens or eggs for that matter, we're in the top, sometimes in the number 2, sometimes number 5, but in the top 10 in the world.
Yeah. You know, there was a time in the early 90s when there was a crisis in the gold mining sector, when the British were overselling gold and it led to, dumping down of the gold price. That almost led to the retrenchment of thousands of workers in South Africa. And that got the government, Labour, and the industry to come together to say, let's work together. What's the way forward in this sector?
Well, you're just repeating history because that's what's happened, is that government has acknowledged we have a crisis. Government has acknowledged that they need to get involved. Government also says this has to be a team effort. So from finding the solutions, the team is the industry, organised labour and various government departments and agencies. Of course, we need the consumer to support us as well and not by foreign. But government's working hard now. And by the way, there are lots of tools in the toolbox that we haven't used. I mean, they're a bit dusty because they've been at the bottom of the toolbox for a while, but we can do a whole lot of things that other countries do to us, which will have the effect of making it more difficult for people to export.
Maybe one last question. Can we be rest assured that the jobs are going to come back?
Not only will the jobs come back, but we'll add more. So if we imported nothing, and that's an unrealistic expectation, we would create around about 50,000 direct and indirect jobs. So a quarter of the chicken that's in South African stomachs, either as chicken or as a chicken product, is foreign. We can grow the industry by 25%, and we can transform the industry in the most amazing way because it's already in the stomachs. So this is a wonderful opportunity. And when the SG said at the beginning of the week, we must buy these farms. Now, it's too late to buy the farms that RCL Foods have sold, which is 2/3 of their farms in KZN. But in a partnership with government, GDAR, the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, are the first of the government departments to actually work with us and say, here's some money, please do certain things. We're an implementation agent for them. We fix these import problems, there's lots of transformation opportunity that will come to this industry and to our country.
That was Kevin Lovell from the South African Poultry Association. Thank you for joining us here in Nation in Conversation. Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you, Mpumelelo. Next week, our journey takes us to the Northwest Province with a variety of tourist attractions. In the area, we visit a local vegetable producer for insights into this industry that contributes significantly to the South African economy. Until then, remember to exercise your rights as a consumer. Join the conversation. It affects us all. Goodbye.
Nation in Conversation, taking you on a journey through the South African countryside. Proudly sponsored by Monsanto, Nedbank and Senves, in association with Hinterland and NWK.